This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi friend, welcome to another episode of the ODAT Chat podcast. I am so grateful you are here with me today. If you are new here, my name is Arlena and you are joining your fellow listeners in over 42 countries. If you'd like me to wish you or your friend a happy sobriety day, feel free to send me an email at arlena@odatchat.com, or you can leave me a message on the Facebook group, the ODAT Chat Facebook group. So for the first ever sobriety birthday spotlight, I would like to wish my amazing husband a very happy birthday as he is celebrating 30 years. Thank you so much for being the best man that I know and a shining example of long-term recovery to so many people. So this is a podcast where my guests and I talk about how to recover from alcoholism and addiction. I'm looking to uncover the moments of clarity, the revelations, and the tools and practices for healing which lead to long-term recovery. So this is a very special episode with the legendary Pat G. Pat has been a pillar in the San Jose community for decades. She's an incredibly charismatic speaker and has helped thousands of people all over the world. But first, this episode is sponsored by my signature masterclass, The Connection Cure: How to Build Self-Esteem, Cure the Isolation Trap, and Create Lasting Changes. Building self-esteem is the key component to transformation and cultivating the life you want to create. I don't care if you're just getting started on your journey of recovery or if you have been practicing for many years. Everyone can benefit from improving self-esteem and gaining more confidence through authentic connection with others just like you. This class includes all the best tools and exercises that have helped me and millions of others transform their lives. Together in a live class, you will have the support and momentum you need to create lasting changes. This will actually be the founders class, so it's going to start December 14th, 2018. It will be a live class online for 4 weeks with a very safe and intimate group of amazing people. So the recordings will be made available in the private Facebook group of this class. So if you want more information or if you just want to go ahead and sign up, you can go to soberlifeschool.com. So today on the podcast, like I said, we have Pat G. Pat is one of the most loving and charismatic women I know. She was already an established leader in the community when I was new to the program. This is like over 25 years ago. She gets asked to speak all the time, but I wanted to give her the opportunity to tell her whole story. And if you would like to connect with her, you can find her on Facebook. I'll leave a link to her Facebook profile in the show notes. So this is a long format interview, so settle in and enjoy this very special episode with the lovely Pat G. Well, Pat, welcome to the ODAT Chat podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts.
Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah. Okay, so you know the drill, right?
Well, I don't really, because I get wrapped up in who's saying where are we going, and do I know these people, and do I remember that? And
right, yeah.
So
okay.
It's all different. Yeah.
So the way I typically start is I'll ask somebody what they do for a living, and we start there.
Okay, well, the interesting thing is that now that I'm pretty much retired and I'm 79 years old, I get paid to take my clothes off. And
again?
Yeah, I never did before when I was young
Damn
and cute. And what it is I work as what they call a standardized patient. And so I have on a hospital gown and underwear. But I have different roles that I play where I'm a sick person.
Really?
And so I did that off and on for like 11 years with foreign doctors.
Okay.
Which was really kind of fun because I kept teaching them stuff that had nothing to do with
I bet you did.
I would say things like, okay, now be where your feet are, knock on the door before you come in and breathe in peace and breathe out stress.
Wow.
So that was working with foreign doctors to coach them to take the exam to be licensed in the United States.
Interesting.
And it's a two-part thing. It's clinical and communications. And I worked on the communications part. didn't do any of the clinical
You worked
stuff.
on communications? Shocking.
Shocking. It was really fun. We had to teach them how to verbalize reassurance and empathy.
Oh, yeah, we do it different here.
Well, in a lot of cultures, that's just countercultural.
Okay.
So what I used to tell them was, if I go to England and I want to drive, I have to drive on what I think is the wrong side of the road.
Yeah.
And it can be really scary if I see what they call a lorry coming at me, which is a big truck. But that's what I have to do if I want to drive over there.
Right.
Well, if you want to get your license, even though this may seem uncomfortable, it's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. This is what you have to do to get your license. After you get your license, you can do whatever you want. You know, I mean, but what was interesting was a 5-day class that they had, and by the end of it, most of them were saying they were going to continue to do it because they could see how verbalizing reassurance and empathy created an instantaneous rapport.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get paid to take your clothes off. That's awesome.
Yeah, is that funny? I crack up laugh. I tell people that. I always love it when the young guys go, "What?
What?
What?
What are you doing?"
I just get a kick out of it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I was not expecting that.
I know. Nobody ever is.
I know, that's awesome. Okay, and what is your sobriety date?
April Fool's Day, 1975.
1975. You were saying that's 43 years.
43 years. And it was the best April Fool's joke ever played on anybody. I mean, I really never intended to be there for 43 days, let alone 43 years. But I had been to AA when I was 18, and I had been again when I was 20. And then I spent 15 years quitting drinking over and over and over and over. And every single thing I did worked. But it didn't work very long. Sometimes it didn't even work for an hour.
15 years?
From my last meeting to my next meeting.
Wow.
I just tried everything. And see, I'm a periodic.
Right.
So my denial was probably a little bit stronger.
Okay.
But because I could quit, but then see, I couldn't stay quit.
Yeah.
That was the thing. When somebody said that to me one time, and I thought, well, if I ever really want to, I could.
Right. Yeah.
And then what happened was I realized that even if I really wanted to, I was always going to drink again. Sooner or later, I was going to drink again.
Sooner or later.
I was a binge drinker and a bar drinker. It's interesting, too. I was a blackout drinker. And one of the things that I learned, I had been to a seminar called The Hijack Brain, and it was when I had my bookstore, and they used to ask me to bring the mobile bookstore to these things when some celebrity had come into town to do a program. And, excuse me, I was having dinner with a friend of mine who's an MD and a friend of his who was a priest, and I was telling them about this, and I said, and what part of the brain do you think is lit up during a blackout? And he started laughing. He said, well, duh, how would we know? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm not going to say I'm in a blackout. Could you please scan my brain? Well, then what I found out is that I used to think some entity took over. I'd say, who's driving the bus?
Right.
But what it is that if you're drunk, the secretary's drunk, and the files do not get moved from short-term memory into long-term memory.
Oh, okay.
And it's interesting too, because that's part of the same situation with Alzheimer's now. They're doing a lot of research on that, and I just wonder, is that the same part of the brain? I don't know.
Right.
And that's why that secretary gets sloppy sometimes, and you'll find files on the floor in the morning. Like,
bits and pieces.
Oh, yeah, I kind of remember that.
Yeah.
But it's why we don't seem, well, we may seem drunk to the people we're with, if we are, and we probably are. And the thing is, not all alcoholics have blackouts. But if you've ever had a blackout, you could quit wondering if you're an alcoholic.
Right.
They tell me, social drinkers never wonder.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
I don't wonder if I'm allergic to 7-Up,
Right.
Why? Because I don't have any symptoms.
Oh.
The only reason we ever wonder if we're alcoholic, we must have some symptoms.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like I don't show up to work on Friday or Monday. I get the flu a lot,
Yeah, you're talking about breaking through the denial. The denial can be so strong in some people. But what I want to ask you first, typically I start with like the backstory. And I don't think that we have really gotten your whole backstory. And I just thought it would be great.
Well, it's probably a good time because someday, excuse me. In fact, I was saying to somebody the other day,
Do you have water?
A lot of this stuff, if I die, nobody will ever know.
Well, they will now.
No, they will.
Yeah,
and that's good, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It would have been. Wouldn't it have been nice to have? Did we get Al E on?
We did a video.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I interviewed him about
that's
a year or
right.
so before he died, and it was interesting because he was such a historian. He was our, he and Jack Holt were our Bob and Bill.
They sure were.
And
yeah, I have pictures of them. I'll show you later of when with Bob when he was a little boy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, I used to take my sponsees over to visit Al on Mondays.
Oh, nice.
And he loved it. He just adored it. And then he'd, tell them all this history and play tapes. And when AA was new in this valley, there were two couples who had AA calls go to their homes, and Al and Bernice were one of those couples. Mm-hmm. And Bernice took down everything, and she dispatched the 12-steppers.
Wow.
And being Bernice, she was a character. She loved to play cards, and she was just so much fun. Well, but she was also very precise about keeping notes and that. And I think it was in 1988 that she recorded all of the notes from her phone logs.
Oh, wow.
And then Al would remember and say, oh, yeah, this happened to that one, and this happened to that one. He told us about some guy weighing 300 pounds who rode a bicycle to Gilroy to get drunk. And,
oh, my goodness.
And then at one point, Al had some kind of a back injury. And I think he was home in a hospital bed or something. And so a call came in, and Bernice couldn't get anybody to take the call, so she said, I'm going. And Al said, oh, no, you're not. And she said, oh, yes, I am. And off she went. And she got this guy, brought him home, and he stayed there for like 2 weeks or something.
Oh, wow.
But it was so amazing. And that's down at Central Office. I mean, anybody could go down and listen to that. It's fascinating.
Right?
Yeah. And then he talked about being here when Bill Wilson accepted the Lasker Award,
Really?
Which was for AA being, having the impact that it had.
Wow.
And so that was pretty exciting getting to I had met some of these people initially through my dad who got picked up for being drunk in Los Angeles and thrown in the LA County Jail. And some people from H&I carried the message to him. And he was only 41 when he got sober. He was 35 when my mother died, which I never realized all of that until my youngest son was 35 and he had 15 years in recovery.
Wow.
And I thought,
Jeff, is it your son, Jeff?
Yeah. I thought if something happened to Julie, with all the recovery that Jeff has, he wouldn't know what to do with these two kids by himself.
Julie is your son's wife?
His wife, yeah. And I thought, it's no wonder that he didn't know what to do with these three little girls.
I know,
He wound up marrying his drinking buddy, and it was a disaster. And
well, let's talk about that too, because I'm always so curious about the parents.
Well, after I had been sent back to New York on the train, this happened because while I was at the orphanage.
Well, can we start from the very tell me what your dad did for a living, and then tell me about your parents.
He was an airplane mechanic. Okay. And he wound up going to Guam with the Seabees for some, I don't know what they were doing there. But then we were really poor. My mother and my two little sisters and I lived out on Long Island in New York and Queens.
Oh, okay. That's where you were born?
Yeah, yeah. And we lived upstairs in a 2-story house where they had made an apartment out of the 3 rooms upstairs. And my mother was amazing. In fact, people have said over the years, healthcare professionals and that I've interacted with have said, it's an absolute amazing thing that you're not a sociopath or a psychopath, but it's because of your mother. Wow. And I can still remember conversations that we had when I was 2 and 3 and 4 years old.
Really?
She always probed a little bit. Like, she'd never just answer something. She'd say, well, why do you ask that? And want to know what was going on. And she was amazing. She was so courageous. And here she was, she was only 36 when she died.
36 with 3 little girls.
Yeah.
Wow, so young. What did she die from?
Cancer.
What kind?
I don't remember if it was ovarian or uterine, but it was one of those. And at that time, she'd been sick for 2 years, and we had been farmed out with relatives and family friends and that.
Because your dad was already gone working?
Yeah, he was in Guam, yeah.
The whole time she was sick?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, in and out. And she'd be in the hospital and out of the hospital, in the hospital and out of the hospital.
And he was just never there the whole time?
Not during the time that she was sick, no. Mm-mm.
He knew she was sick and he just
I don't know if he really knew that it was terminal or not, you know. I mean, because I'm sure he was drunk a good part of the time in Guam.
Oh, so
he was an alcoholic.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, part of my job used to be before he went to Guam, we lived at the kind of a little hill, and around the corner, down the street around the corner, there was like Aunt May's was a little grocery store, and then there was a little bar and restaurant that was an Italian pizzeria place where you could get pasta, spaghetti, and that. And the bus stopped in front of there. So he would pay me a nickel to go down and wait and tell him when the bus was a couple of blocks away and run in and get him out of the bar so he could finish his beer before he went to work.
Oh my God.
So I don't know what time of the
work.
Yeah, I don't know what time of the day that was, but I was up, and it must have been before I started school.
Yeah.
I started school on my own, which was another help. My poor mother. She was keeping me out of kindergarten, because I was supposed to go to Catholic school, and they didn't have kindergarten. Oh. So I went to visit my little friend my mother had a friend who, first of all, she was a Protestant from Maine. We didn't know anybody like that. And she talked kind of funny because she was from Maine. And I think about it, she must not have really been too bright, because Lucy went to the afternoon kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So I'm over there playing, and it's, I don't know how many blocks away it was. It was a good distance. And so Lucy said she had to go to school, and I didn't really know what happened at school because I wasn't going to be going for another year. And she said, "Why don't you come with me?" And I said, "Can I?" And she said, "Well, let me ask my mother." So her mother says, "Yeah, sure." So off I go. So bizarre. Dirty face, ripped coveralls, scuffy shoes, my hair's in long braids, but all wispy. And I get to the school, and I'm enchanted. I've never seen those little tiny half-pint milk cartons, and they had little chairs. Everybody sat on the chairs. They played the piano, and I was enthralled. And I'm sure the teacher thought she had finally found a little, munchkin that she could rescue, this poor child of poverty, which, we were poverty, but not like that. And so she told me and had asked my mother if I could come back, and so wow. I go home. My mother's frantic. She's home with these two little babies, What? Where have you been? I said, I went to school. You went to school? I said, yeah, I went to school with Lucy. Looking like that? And I said, yeah. And I remember her saying, oh my God, what will the teacher think of you? And worse yet, what will she think of me? And I said, well, she really liked me and she wants me to come back, and she'll like you once she gets to know you. So can I go back? Can I go back tomorrow? Please, please, please. So she said, okay. And then I had to have my hair washed, and I had to wear my Mary Janes and my Sunday go to meeting dress, my mass dress, and go all dressed up, to school. And that was how I started school. Wow. It just cracks me up. And the teacher, I got sent home from the first grade when I found out that the cowboys were really the bad guys, that the Indians were here first. Because I had just learned in kindergarten, whoever has it first gets to keep it. Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. And I'm raising my hand, teacher. And I said, then, she said the Indians were here first. And I said, then the cowboys are the bad guys. And she said, well, do you think we should give the country back to the Indians? And I said, well, I guess so. I had just learned all these rules in kindergarten. I know. And she said, well, are you willing to give up your home? I said, I guess so. I don't know. And she said, well, it's not going to happen. And I remember saying to her, I was always saying to them, now look. Okay, I'm going to teach you. Now look. If it's recess and I'm playing with the ball and I come to you and I say, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I put the ball on the bench, when I come back, if someone else is playing with it, you make them give it back to me. Because whoever had it first gets to keep it.
Only forever.
Forever.
Right.
And she just, kind of, and I remember going home telling my mother there's no point in me even going back to school anymore because they don't know any of this stuff. They don't know that whoever had it first gets to keep it.
They don't know anything.
Yeah.
I thought you were supposed to go to school to learn, right?
Yeah. And then they're teaching plurals. And I remember her saying, there was house and mouse and houses and mice. Excuse me. Should be house and houses and mouse and mouses, or house and heist and mouse and mice. Well, maybe it should be, but it's not.
It's not.
And I thought, well, whatever. And then she said, and the plural of you is you. Oh, no. We're in New York, right?
It's
I said, the plural of you is yous. Yes. And she said, no, it's not. It's you. And I remember saying, well, now look, if I'm playing with one friend, I say you. But if I'm playing with more than one, I say yous. And she said, well, you're wrong. And I remember saying to her, didn't you ever hear of yous guys? And I went home again and told my mother, this teacher, there's no point in me going to school. She doesn't even know about yous guys.
Yous guys. Listen,
I was always questioning.
I
I was always questioning. And that was the thing with my mother, always answered my questions.
Oh.
I always wanted to know who said so.
Yeah.
I didn't know the word credibility.
Right.
But that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, you were looking for the credibility.
Yeah. One time I was about 3 and I got dressed and I guess I had on a red sweater and a pink plaid skirt. My mother said, oh, you look very nice. You dressed yourself. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, they say you're not supposed to wear red and pink together. And I wanted to know who they were.
Right.
Smart. And I still wonder sometimes who they are.
They are.
But you know what? There really is a color council who decides all this stuff a couple of years ahead of time.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, and that's why certain colors are the fall colors this year, and cars and appliances and
so bizarre.
I get into these things about because here's the funny thing. I had a family member who was spending some time out at the spa at Elmwood, and they decided
the jail.
Yes, a women's jail, and they decided to automate the visitor thing. Now, prior to this, you would go out there 2 hours ahead of your visiting time, stand in line for an hour to find out if they were going to be able to have a visitor or not, and then wait another hour for the visit. And yes, it was cumbersome, but it worked. And people would bring books, or we didn't have cell phones then. We'd bring a book, or read the newspaper or something. Yeah. So they automate it, and I get stuck in this endless loop where, there's no way I can get through. They're putting me on hold. At that time, they had message units. I'm calling out there trying to get this resolved. Finally, my sister and I go out there, and the woman, first of all, said to me, I said, I get stuck in here and there's nothing that'll happen. I said, I have a password and everything. She said, well, you're just not in the system. I said, I am in the system. I was out there because I used to go to H&I bringing AA meetings out there once a month to the women. So I'm standing there and she thinks she's dealing with a grown-up. And what she's dealing with is a 10-year-old in a grown-up's body who is saying, there they go again. The authorities are changing the rules and they don't tell you.
Yeah.
And I remember saying something to her about she was very rude. And I made believe I was writing down the time and the date. And then I said, and what's your name? And she said, we don't give that out because of security. And I said, oh, well, what do they call your job title? She said, what do you mean? I said, what do they call what you do? And she said, we don't give that out. And then she said, step away from the window, ma'am. And one thing I have learned in my years in recovery, pay attention. When she said it the second time, I thought, if I don't step away from the window, I won't need to worry about a visitor's pass.
Because you're going to be
I'll be in there and we can just talk bed to bed, you know.
Right.
So I leave. My sister's thing is all straightened out, no problems. I get home. And I called out there because I was feeling really bad. And I said to my sister, I have to make amends. This is crazy. So I call out there and lo and behold, they answered the phone. And I said, oh, this is Pat Gallagher calling. And I was, I was out there earlier and I got into a bit of a disagreement with someone. It wasn't her fault, And she said, oh, that was me. And I said, oh. And she said, yeah, and after you left, I talked to my supervisor, and she said I should have taken care of all of that because you have permanent clearance. Nobody has permanent clearance, but I had 2 years at that time clearance. So I said, well, you didn't have any way to know that, And she said, well, if you can fax that stuff over to me and then call me back at 4 o'clock, I'll take care of it. And I said, okay, fine. So I did, and she did. And when I called back at 4 o'clock, they answered. So I get this, paper that says this is all set up and that. And then I find out that my family member has had to go to Valley Med for some minor surgery, and they're keeping her overnight at the main jail.
So your sister was in jail?
No, a family member was in jail. Okay. But my sister and I were both going to go and see her. I see. So, no, my sister was the foreperson of the grand jury and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Okay. But, so we go there, and my sister says, well, do you think we can go and see her at the main jail? I said, I don't know, call the visitor center. So they say, oh, absolutely not. You only are authorized to go to Elmwood. So I said, come on, we're going downtown. So one of the things I learned over the years was look for who's in charge quickly. So we get into the main jail, and it's insane in the lobby there, but I see a guy in a uniform, and all these people are lined up. I said, come on. So we get in line, and I've got my paper that says I have authority to visit with this person. So the guy, now it's my turn, and I hand it to him. I say, they told me to give this to you. And he looks at it. See, he doesn't say, who are they? He looks at it, and he says, oh, is she here? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, go and wait over there, but you can't both go together. Okay. I said, no problem. So my sister says to me then, what would you have done if he had pursued that? I said, they never do. When you say to somebody, they told me to give this to you, they immediately say, oh, okay. Right. They never ask who they are. Yeah. But I always want to know who they are.
Yeah, you do. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so walk me through what happens to your mom, because that kicked off a chain of events.
She finally got the word that she was terminal. And
you were 8? I
was 7 when she got this news.
Okay.
And they brought me to her. At that point, she was staying at my one aunt's house. Her apartment. She had an apartment that was so cool. It overlooked the East River in New York. And she told me that she was going to die. And we had had a conversation.
She told you.
Yeah. We had had a conversation when I was 5. I was on my way to school with Mary Ann. Mary Ann was in 2nd grade, but she went home for lunch, and then we would walk to school together. And I wasn't supposed to play at Mary Ann's house because she had teenage brothers that the cops were always looking for. They were Italian, too, you know. And I went over there every chance I got. It was so exciting. They were all yelling all the time. They weren't mad. They just yelled
They're
a
just
lot.
Italian.
Yeah, and I loved it. And the mother was always cooking. She called it sauce, big pot. And I loved it. Yeah. But I wasn't supposed to play over there. So we're walking to school, and Mary Ann says, and Mary Ann knew everything. She was the one who told me where babies came from. I thought she was probably making that up. But she also told me that your parents are Santa Claus. And so then she says to me, did you hear Mrs. Murphy died? I said, died? What's that? She said, that's when they come and take you away and nobody ever sees you anymore. I said, oh, you mean like kidnapped? Because my mother was always saying, don't go with anybody, even if they offer you candy or a puppy or anything, because they'll take you away and I won't see you anymore. Oh, okay. So I said, you mean like, she said, no, it's grown-ups. So I sat in kindergarten all afternoon thinking about that. And when I got home, I said to my mother, did you hear Mrs. Murphy died? Who told you that? Mary Ann. Well, you're not supposed to be over there. Oh, I wasn't. We were walking to school. I said, what's died? And she said, so what did Mary Ann say? And I said, well, she said, that's when they come take you away. Nobody ever sees you anymore. And she said, well, that's not really it. She said, that's when you go to live with Jesus. And I said, you mean baby Jesus or big Jesus? I mean, I'm trying to straighten this stuff out. I had just gotten through the other thing of learning in kindergarten, you don't get to go to every party and you don't get invited to everything. And when it's somebody else's party, you don't get a present. And about
Those are very difficult lessons.
Right. About a week earlier, she had said it was coming up on Christmas and we were going to be getting presents for other people. and that Christmas was the birthday of Jesus. And I said, well, then why are we getting presents? Oh, first thing I want to know is, are they going to have a party, and will we be invited? And then why are people getting presents on his birthday? This doesn't make any sense. And she said, well, because he can't be at all these parties, and it makes him happy when we're nice to each other. I said, oh, okay. So then the next thing is, you're going to go and live there. And I said, oh. And then she said the most shocking thing I'd ever heard in 5 years. She said, someday everyone is going to die. And I said, everyone? And I expected her to say, everyone but our family. Aww. And she said, yes, everyone. And then I said, are you? Now, see, she's supposed to say, well, no, not me. I'll stay here and take care of you guys. And she said, yeah, someday I will. And then I said, am I? Now, here's the 5-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. I said, well, I ain't going. I said, am I? And she said, yeah, someday you're going to die too. And I said, I ain't going. And I remember saying to her, I'm going to be 150. I ain't going. And then I started crying. I said, I have to die to be a grown-up, because they dressed funny and they, they were different. And she tried to explain to me form and substance, which I didn't get at all. And she said, well, remember Kathy and Irene, when they were first born, they couldn't walk or talk or anything, and now they can. And they didn't have to die for that. They changed into, toddlers. Right. Oh, okay. So then, fast forward 2 years, she tells me she's going to die. And I said, don't go. And she said, well, God needed her. And I remember saying, God must be crazy. We need you. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to know.
What a thing to tell a child. That's so
see, it made sense in her mind, though.
Sure, but it didn't help you.
But what I wanted to know is, when did you talk to God? Where did you see God? What did God look like? When God shows up again, you let me talk to him. There's a little kid who needs Al-Anon at 7. I need AA at 5, and I need Al-Anon at 7. I'll take care of it all.
Yeah.
You just let me talk to God.
Wow.
And where did you see him? What did he say specifically?
Right.
I wasn't buying that at all. And then it was within about a year that she died.
Did she decline? You could see it?
I really couldn't. I remember they snuck me into the hospital to see her on my birthday, or on her birthday.
Just for her birthday, not to say goodbye.
Yeah, no. Her birthday was April 13th, and then she died in 2 weeks. But she looked fine to me. I just didn't understand why she was wearing a hospital gown instead of the pajamas I got her for her birthday.
Uh-huh.
But it was just, they didn't tell me she was dead. I was staying with Maxine again, the main Protestant.
Oh, Maxine, right.
So Maxine comes in, it's dark, and she says, get up and put on your Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, is what she used to call church clothes. Sunday go-to-meeting. And you're not going to go to school today. And I said, where are we going? And she said, we're going to go see your mother. Oh, okay. So it's dark. We get on the bus and we're driving along and riding along on the bus. And I said, is she better? And she said, no. I said, is she better than when she went in the hospital? And she said, well, you might say she's better off. And I knew, don't ask anything else. Don't ask anything. You're going to hear something horrible. So comes time to pull the thing in. We're going to Thomas J. Quinn and Sons, which is across from the hospital. And I used to think that when you pulled the cord, that it actually stopped the bus. And I used to love to do that. It felt really powerful.
Yeah.
So we get off the bus in front of the funeral parlor, and I say, why are we going here? Well, your mother's here. And then I thought, this is just a joke. They're trying to see what I'll do if I think my mother's dead. Because I can remember being at that same funeral parlor when my grandmother died. It was the first time I'd ever seen my mother cry. And I said, why are you crying? And she said, because Grandma's dead. And I remember patting her on the knee and saying, that's okay. That's nothing to cry about. That's what she used to say to me all the time. That's okay. There's nothing to cry about. You'll be okay. So I go in, and there's my mother lying in this coffin. And I want her to get up and get out of there. And she doesn't. And they're trying to tell me that she's dead, and I'm getting hysterical. And they decided that I couldn't go to her funeral because I was too emotionally disturbed. I mean, give me a break, you crazy people. So for years, I wouldn't go to her funeral. I didn't care who died, I wouldn't go. And ultimately, I have wound up being the one who's coordinated funerals and memorial services and all of that kind of stuff.
You do a lot of service.
Yeah, it's like, but it was just so, with her gone, then my father comes from California a month or two later. And in the meantime, her little brother had molested me. It was just, I mean...
Your uncle?
Yeah, just... And he had been my favorite uncle. We used to go to Times Square and get ice cream and that. And it was like, I knew something was wrong. He was heating milk and scotch and trying to get... And see, we went to Aunt Peggy's house and she wasn't there. I didn't know she wasn't there.
Okay.
So he had called the aunt that I was staying with at that time, my father's sister, and asked if it was okay if we went to get ice cream. Well, I could never go get ice cream with him again. In fact, it was like I knew something was really, really wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I wanted to run next door to the apartment next door, but I was embarrassed because he had taken my clothes, and it was horrible.
Man. How you were?
I was 8.
Jeez.
Yeah, and it was weird too because years later, after I was back in New York and my sisters were back there, they had come back later, and we were at some kind of a family function, and he was there, and my sisters and I, whenever we saw each other, we used to give each other these big kisses like in the movies or something, and he was leaning up against the wall, and he said, "I wish somebody would kiss me like that," and I went storming up to him, and I said, "Listen, you, I remember what you did to me. And if you ever lay a hand on either of my sisters, I'll kill you." And I meant it. I don't know how I thought I would kill him, but that's what I meant.
Yeah.
And then years later in therapy, I was saying to my therapist, you know, that was kind of like before the time that they were having victims and perpetrators confront each other.
Right.
And she said, "Yeah, but you didn't do it for you. You did it for your sisters." And it was like, yeah, I never really could defend myself. I could defend anybody else, you know. In fact, I was, out marching in the streets against the war in Vietnam. And,
were you?
Oh, God, marching with Cesar Chavez, trying to organize the farm workers. And
Were you a Gloria Steinem fan?
oh, yeah, and Joan Baez was my hero. I joined Amnesty International so I could hang out with her and her sister. And, it was like, I had this idea that I had to save the world somehow, just a little bit,
Yeah.
just
Do
a
you
little
feel
bit.
that comes from being so vulnerable as a child?
I think so. Yeah, and I think you can go one way or the other.
You can.
You can
You're
either
either
go
a
to where
victim-
you don't care and you're gonna just make war on the world,
Right.
on them,
Yeah.
or you're gonna wind up with compassion.
And try to save everyone.
Right, and I don't try to save everybody anymore because I've been to our sister program and really learned about what codependency is when I'm trying to live somebody else's life or something. But one of the things I learned, I was chairing an Al-Anon meeting one time, and I had the topic be the difference between supporting and enabling.
That's good.
I got some interesting answers, but the one I liked the best was the one that came to me, and it was when you're supporting someone, it's life affirming, and everybody feels good.
Yeah.
And when you're enabling them, it's not life supporting, and nobody feels good.
Nobody feels good.
So I've had people come to me over the years and say, "Well, do you think I'm enabling or am I supporting?" I said, "How do you feel?"
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so quick. It's like, if it's life affirming, it's supporting.
I love that.
Isn't that great?
That's so good.
And it's so simple.
I got another one for you. What's the difference between being alone for self-care and isolating?
Oh, interesting.
Do you think it's like maybe a time, like a matter of, because I need to be alone sometimes
Oh, yeah.
to recharge.
But that's solitude.
Solitude.
Solitude. See?
Solitude versus
Isolation.
Yeah.
And when we're isolating, it's like we're pulling ourselves into the dark.
Yeah.
Whereas solitude, you could be sitting under a tree, reading poetry, listening to music, drawing a picture, or just meditating, and you're enjoying that
Life
time with
affirming.
yourself. Yeah.
Okay, that's life affirming again.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's life affirming, and isolation is not. Yeah.
It's a total different feeling. Nobody feels
Interesting.
good.
Yeah. Nobody feels good when they're isolating.
All right, so your mother passes away, your father comes back, and is he taking care of all three of you girls?
Yeah, he marries his drinking buddy, and we're living in the projects in Alameda. Okay.
Oh, you moved to, okay.
We
Okay.
come to California, and I'm all excited because I'm thinking that California's like in the movies.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And I can hardly wait to get to California. Well, we get off we had to change planes a couple of times and refuel, and that this was in the olden days. Mm-hmm. And I start crying. My father says, "What's the matter?" I said, "It looks just like New York." You know, they had houses instead of ranches. And I remember telling one of my schoolmates, well, when Roy Rogers rides past our ranch, I'll get his autograph and I'll send it to everybody.
Oh, how sweet.
And the teacher was trying to, give me some realistic expectations. And I wasn't having any of it. No, because I went to the movies every week.
Oh, man. Did you like your stepmom?
No.
No,
she was horrible. Kind to you? She was horrible. She'd go to jail today for child abuse.
Really?
I mean, she was horrible. She used to hit. She came after me one time with a bed slat. From that they use in to hold a mattress up in bunk beds.
Yeah.
And she was trying to get me to come down, and she said, "Get down here." I said, "I will not. You're going to hit me with that thing."
Yeah.
She was terrible, and she used to practice sarcasm.
Oh.
And the thing was, if you didn't do what she said, then she'd beat you up. So there's this one. She was visiting with a friend of hers at a different apartment. And I went in, she said, "Oh, go play in the traffic." And I said, "What?" And she said, "You heard me, go play in the traffic." So I go out to the street where buses are and cars and that. And I thought, I don't know how to play in the traffic. What do you do?
You're just a little girl.
Yeah, I'm 8 years old. And I think if I don't do this, she's going to beat me up. And if I do it, I might get hit by a bus. But I'll take my chances with the bus.
Oh, my God.
So, and I think about that, like having to try to figure out what's the lesser of two evils at 8.
This is right after your mother dies.
Right.
And he gets married right away?
Well, he had been out drinking with her prior to this, before my mother died, I know.
Scandalous.
Yeah. And so people are honking the horn, and I'm acting like a matador out there. I'm going, Toro, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I hear her yelling, and I go, and I said, what? And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm playing in the traffic, like you said." Bam, bam, bam. She starts beating me up, and I thought, you can't win. Then, because she says I'm being sarcastic. I don't even know what sarcastic means. Okay.
Right.
Now, about a week later, she sends me to the grocery store. There's a Lucky's, I don't know, a mile away or so. So I'm walking along, and I see the rainbow is in the back parking lot of Lucky's. So I thought, oh man, I got to figure out how to trick the leprechaun. Which, why don't they just tell you the leprechaun's going to give you the gold for finding it, instead of the Irish thing is you got to trick them out of it.
Right. And meanwhile, in reality, a rainbow is actually a circle.
Well, I don't know this. All I know is it's right there, and so I'm thinking about how I'm going to get this. Well, then I get there, and it's farther, another couple of blocks. So I go another couple of blocks. And
still further.
The third time I get it, it's like you can't get to the end of the rainbow. There is no end of the rainbow. And I thought, because I'm thinking, man, we're going to be rich. Me and my sisters are going to be out of here.
Leave.
We're leaving with all this gold. I don't know what I think I'm going to do with all this gold, but we're leaving. And then I think, and now I'm going to be in trouble because I took too long to go to the store.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. Was crazy. She was crazy. I ran away. I started running away from home.
Oh, you did?
When I was 8, yeah. And one time I ran away, and I went all the ways from the Naval Shipyard, all the ways into downtown Alameda, all the ways through the tube, out to Lake Merritt. Right. And I found a tree where the branches went all the ways down to the ground. And I thought, I'll live here under this tree. This will be a great place to live. So I went and stole some candy for dinner from Long's or some drugstore. And I go back and I sit there and I eat some candy, and then I lay down and go to sleep. And I wake up, my teeth are chattering. I'm so cold.
So cold.
And I look out and I see there's a little diner not too far away. So I go over to the diner, and I just want to go in there and stay warm. I don't think they'll notice me. Well, of course they're going to notice me. There's nobody else in there except these 2 waitresses. So I tell them I was visiting my aunt, and I went for a walk, and I got lost. So the next thing I know, they call the police.
Oh, shoot.
And they they gave me hot chocolate to drink and stuff.
Sweet.
And then the cops show up, and I won't tell them who I am. I'm getting ready to be anonymous. I won't tell them. So I tell them this ridiculous story, too. And so they put me in the back of the police car, and I notice there's a shotgun or something in there, and I'm thinking, I don't know how to shoot a gun, but if I did, I could just get out of here, and they take me to the police station, and they're playing good cop, like they're letting me drink Coke and play with their typewriter and all of that. And finally I tell them who I am, and they have to call my father. And I don't think he even knew I was gone, because he had to, we didn't have a car. He had to take the bus over.
Right.
Get me. I don't know why they didn't take me home. I guess because they were Oakland and was on me. I don't know. But then I couldn't figure out why was everybody always mad at me. It's like if I ran away, stuff got fixed. I didn't know how to do it, and it just continued and continued and continued. Then my father just took off. He got drunk and left, and we wound up as wards of the court. And
what happened to his wife?
They got an annulment.
Okay.
Thank God, Right. Not that it made any difference to us, and I was glad. And he got married again later to another crazy person, but by that time it didn't matter to me. But
you guys went into foster care?
Yeah. And then let's see. Well, no, and then we were in the orphanage for a while, and Collier's Magazine did an article on the Catholic Youth Organization, and for some reason they came to the Mount, is what they call the place. And I was leaving to go out and go roller skating with some of the other kids there. Mm-hmm. And there was this little man at the door, and he said, "Wait, I want to take your picture." And I said, "Okay." So we went down to the Rose Garden and sat on the steps, and I remember him saying, "Now look serious." And I remember thinking, I can look any way you want me to. I can look any feeling you want, but I don't feel it. I just don't feel it. And so
you're just shut down emotionally already?
Oh, yeah, because I had made that decision when my father disappeared, that I was never going to love anybody again. And I would act like everything was okay so nobody would know. But I would know.
Right.
So that would give me some sense of,
some sense of
empowerment.
Control. Yeah.
So when the magazine came out about 6 weeks or so later, my cousin in New York saw it, and they had no idea what had ever happened to us. So they made arrangements, and my one aunt made arrangements with the state of California for me to go back. And
but what about your sisters?
They were still here, and they were coming next. Mm-hmm. They were both at the orphanage. They didn't. Okay. But see, I even ran away from the orphanage. It's crazy. I ran away from everywhere, and I ran away from every foster home, and it was just crazy. And then when I got back to New York, our train was late pulling into Chicago because the Mississippi River had flooded, and I didn't know what to do because I had missed my connection to New York.
Shoot.
And I asked some passenger, what should I do? And he said, go find Traveler's Aid. They'll help you. And I think sometimes, how did they even know I could read? Mm-hmm. So I found Traveler's Aid, and they said, well, they could get me another train. But nobody thought to call my aunt or tell her what happened or anything.
So was I.
And they told me that I had to go to a different train station to catch this train. And I don't know how I got there. I don't remember if I took a taxi or a bus or I walked or I don't remember.
And you're just a little girl.
Yeah, but I got there and I found the train station, and eventually I found my train, and I was in a car with a whole carload full of young soldiers who were on their way to North Carolina or someplace. Mm-hmm. I was scared to death of them because I'm just coming out of an all-girls, Catholic orphanage.
Right.
And I remember I wouldn't go to bed. I sat up in the porter kept trying to come, and it was the old Pullmans where they made down into a bed up on top and below. And
sure.
So, but the next morning, They taught me how to play poker, and I won $13.
Wow.
They probably let me win it,
Yeah.
So when I get off the train in New York, my aunt's there, but instead of this big welcome that I'm expecting, I get the, "Where have you been? I've been worried, sick." And
were
it's
mad
like,
at you.
yeah, I mean, I didn't have any control over any of that.
Right.
But today, I would understand it was because she was scared and worried that something had happened,
Yeah. And you must have felt so disappointed.
I did. It was terrible. And so I kept running away from there, too.
Right.
And then while I was there, I got a letter from my father. And I recognized his handwriting. He had this beautiful penmanship. And I wish I still had it because it was an amends letter. And he was telling me about having been picked up and thrown in jail in LA and how he joined Alcoholics Anonymous and working the steps, and about his sponsor, who I got to meet later.
Oh, you
his
did?
first sponsor, yeah. And in fact, his name was Benny, and he was married to a woman named Margaret. And I wound up giving them my hotel room in Montreal through a series of events that they were going to be out on the street. It was just crazy. But the thing was that, okay, we're going to all live happily ever after. And then we
now
didn't.
That he's sober.
Yeah, we didn't, because they wouldn't allow us to live with him unless he had 24-hour supervision, if he had a live-in housekeeper. And he eventually got married, but in the meantime, we were in and out of foster homes. And my sisters went into a really good foster home.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, with an Italian family, and they couldn't have any children. And then after they had Kathy and Irene there, they wound up having 3 boys. Yeah, it was wonderful. And they're still close. My sister Irene is still close. Nice. Yeah, I was close to them.
So they were all set. And where did you stayed with your aunt?
No, I came to California and wound up going in and out of foster homes, and I kept running away.
She couldn't handle you, so she sent you back?
Well, no, because when my father got sober, he arranged with the courts for us to come back to California.
Got it. Oh, okay.
But then I thought we were all going to live together happily ever after, and
it wasn't like
we
that.
couldn't. And then, because I kept running away all the time, they decided to send me to Napa State Hospital for quote-unquote observation. I never saw a doctor. I was forced to do things like work in the shock room and hold people down, and I was like 13 by this time. It was crazy. It was crazy. That's why I say, that's where I learned how to really check out.
Oh, my God.
Just check out. And the thing was that I would go there. There was a 90 days observation. Well, I had 3 90-day observations, never saw a doctor. Wow. And all I was at the first time I went, they didn't have any room in the children's unit. So they sent me to an adult unit. And that's scary. Where, all this crazy stuff was going on. And then, but they used to use shock treatment, even like punishment and that, but they couldn't do anything to me because I was a juvenile, which was helpful.
But you had to be witness to all these traumatic events.
Well, I had to hold these people down, and the patients would say to me, "Tell my doctor I don't want them to do this anymore." And sometimes the patients had to tell the doctors how to run the equipment. It was terrible. And then I did spend some time in the children's unit, and then I was back on an adult ward, and I was being a smart aleck. You're not supposed to sit on the floor. That's against the rules. And this one technician went by, and I said to my friends who were sitting on the floor with me, "Don't worry, comrades. When the revolution occurs, the inmates will be running the asylum." So she gets on the phone and calls over to the men's side and says, this teenage person is, trying to foment a revolution over here. So they put me in a back ward, which was just, did you ever see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yeah.
It was just like that. We didn't have a dining room. We had this, you had to go down this long tunnel into this big room, and there were just fights, food fights, and people would take your food, and you'd be talking to somebody, and then they'd start telling you how they were the Blessed Mother, and it was just nuts. And fortunately, I had been assigned a new social worker. I can't remember her name, but thank God it wasn't Mrs. Bendorf, whom I do remember. And when she got there to pick me up, they said I must have been released. I wasn't there. And the weird thing was they had just found some guy who'd been there like for 30 years and they didn't even know it. He'd just been wandering around, eating here and there and sleeping here and there. So she told me that. She said to them, well, either you will find her or I will go into town and get the sheriff and a warrant, and we will go building by building, ward by ward, bed by bed till we find her.
Wow.
So she came to get me, and she was horrified. And all I can remember is the two of us. It was, by that time it was getting dark, and we had my suitcase and we were running to her car. And she was just out of college. I was her first client, thank God, because she probably thought, I'm not losing my first client.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
She was ready to save the world.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. So then I wound up going to live with my dad and his next wife, and I ran away from there too. And it was just crazy. I went back to school. I always did really well in school because academically I had it, but I didn't have any, coping skills. You know, I mean,
Yeah, right. We don't learn coping skills.
no. And I knew how to get along in juvenile hall, but I didn't know how to get along in a parochial school in a good zip code.
Had you started drinking?
Oh yeah.
I-
In fact, in New York, the drinking age was 18. So we could always get someone who looked 18 to go and get us beer and stuff. And I drank every chance I got. In fact, at my aunt and uncle's, I used to go up in the attic, and he was so not an alcoholic. He'd brought back some brandy from the war in Germany or something.
And it was still up there.
Yeah, so I used to drink it and pour water in it to
Right.
bring it up. You know, I don't know if they ever
gets
noticed it
lighter
or
and
not.
lighter.
Yeah. He probably just figured that happens when you leave it in the attic. You know?
Who knows? Yeah.
But by this time, so my dad's sober, but he doesn't realize that I'm getting drunk.
Oh, wow.
you
And
know.
how old are you at this time?
By now, I was like 14 and 15,
Okay.
16.
All right. So you're
Yeah.
a teenager.
Yeah.
Full swing.
And all I wanted was to just get away from everybody and have everybody just leave me alone.
Did you? How old were you when you finally got away from your family and to be on your
18.
own? 18.
Yeah.
You left at 18.
Yeah, I left. Yeah.
Where did you go?
Went to Santa Cruz.
From Alameda?
No, from Fresno. We had moved to Fresno.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is nothing going on in Fresno.
Nope.
It's all
No.
agriculture, right?
Although there were, some farm boys who knew how to drink,
Wherever you go, there
And we
they
could
are.
always go, my best friend and I would go to these little towns in the area, and we could drink in the bars and that, because they never asked us how old we were.
Right,
They just, I guess, assumed.
Well, it's always good to have cute girls in the bar.
Right. Kept the boys coming in.
Right.
So ultimately, I wound up in San Francisco, and that was where I ran into my ex-husband. I got a job working in a little coffee shop in San Francisco. I don't even remember how I got this job, but anyhow, it was a neighborhood thing, and I started dating one of the owner's sons, and his friend was Paul, who I wound up marrying. And the thing that you would say about Paul if you met him ever was, what a nice guy. I mean, he's just such a nice guy. But he's an alcoholic. And it's the old joke about how I thought when we got married that he would change, and he thought I wouldn't, and we were both wrong.
Right.
You know?
Funny how that works out.
Yeah. And my being the periodic, and him being a daily drinker, it was like, well, he's the one with the problem. I can quit.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that why you divorced? Because of his drinking?
Yeah.
How long were you married?
We were married about 10 years.
Oh, that's a good long stretch. And this is the father of
my two sons.
Your two boys,
yeah. And I'm probably his best friend today.
Is that right? You guys are so good?
Yeah, he's been married a couple of times since, and his last two wives have died. And I said to him, I don't know what you do to these women, but I said, you must have liked being married to me more than I like being married to you, because you keep doing it and I don't.
Right.
But my whole...
You never remarried?
I never did. My whole thing was, when my kids are grown, then I'll think about that. Because I really always thought there'd just be all these guys around. There always were, when you're young,
Yeah.
And I did have, a couple little, one relationship was like 3 years long, and I thought that it was healthy because neither of us was drinking, and it was one of the most dysfunctional things in the world. Neither of us knew how to I have learned more about healthy relationships from sponsoring people.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because, in growing through these different things with them.
Sure.
And I had to learn how to say, let's figure out a way that you can stay long enough to realize if you should stay or go.
Right.
Whereas,
you need a minute, especially when you first get sober.
Because my first thing was always, let's go. Get out of here. Right. Be gone, you know. So.
Cut that out.
Yeah, I went to AA when
What got you into AA? You said you got started at 18?
I went at 18 because I thought I'm just drinking too much. And then I didn't really get it. Mm-hmm. And then I went again at 20 and I still didn't get it. Because one of the things I've learned over time is people who say AA doesn't work think it's about not drinking. They don't realize it's about living and getting, tools for life. People and so they say it doesn't work because I drank. Well, yeah, you didn't do the deal.
Right, you got to do the deal.
I told somebody the other day, just because you're in a garage doesn't mean you're a car,
So can you break it down really simply, like what is doing the deal?
Okay, so doing the deal, first of all, is working the steps. Okay. And the funny thing is, everybody who watches TV has heard about the steps. Yeah. Everything you watch, comedy, drama, mystery, somebody's either getting into rehab, just got out of rehab, needs to go to rehab, their sponsor just died, right. They're getting a chip at a meeting, whatever.
Right.
And if whoever's writing the script has ever even been to an AA meeting, by the way they write it. And in fact, I remember watching a show one time. It was about a bunch of single people in a circle in a classroom, and on the blackboard it said, tonight's homework, chapter 5, how it works. And it just kind of tickled me. So when I had been sober for a while, I was working for a division of Westinghouse, and I was sent to Pittsburgh by quote-unquote mistake, because I was middle management and everybody else was executive management. And we had just acquired a software company in upstate New York. I was a project manager for them. So we get there, and it's a week-long. It was a great class. I learned a lot, And it was funny, though, because the guys from the new company all came to me because I knew how to get expense reports through. And the other guys didn't know because their secretaries did that.
Okay.
So we would get broken up into small groups and given these case studies, and then we were supposed to decide if there was a problem or not, and if so, what are you going to do? And the leader was chosen by drawing straws, and the short straw was the leader. Mm-hmm. So I get the short straw 4 times out of 5. Well, the second, third, and fourth time wasn't too bad. The first time, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do this. And these are people from Wharton, Yale, Harvard. Wow. They're
educated.
With multiple letters after their names. I signed my name one time on a memo that I sent out. It said Pat Gallagher, HP, and people were called, oh, did you get a new degree? I said, no, that just means happy person. But this little voice inside says, just do what you know how to do the steps. So I said, okay, I'll try that. So I've got the papers. I said, okay, has everybody had a chance, to review this? Yeah. Is there a problem? No. Okay, put it aside. Okay, how about this one? Everybody review it? Yeah. Is there a problem? Oh, yeah, there's a problem. Well, is it manageable? Yeah, it's manageable. Okay, put it aside. Okay, now we have, how about this one? Is there a problem? Yeah. Is it manageable? No, it's not manageable. Is there a solution? No. Okay, so we have an unmanageable problem with no solution. Put it aside. Okay, how about this? We have a problem. Do we? Yes. Is it manageable? No. Is there a solution? Yeah. Are we willing to develop and devote the resources to solving it? No. Okay, so now we have a problem that's unmanageable. There is a solution, but we're not willing to do the work. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Put it aside. Okay. Now what about this one? Is there a problem? Yeah. Is it manageable? No. Is there a solution? Yeah. Are we willing to devote the resources to resolving it? Yeah. Okay, well, now we have to write it up. Okay, and we're going to have to run it by senior management in our peer group. And then we have to turn it over to the appropriate department and let them fix it. We can't keep micromanaging it. However, we're going to have to review all our policies and procedures to see if anything needs to be amended, because maybe we're causing the problem. Okay? And now we need to continue to monitor this, read up on it, maybe even meditate. And then when it's resolved, we need to share the solution with everybody else in corporate who may be having the same problem. And they go, God, where do you get that stuff? And I said, I didn't know what to say. Finally, I said, well, it's the Bill Wilson seminars. And they go, God, if they ever come back to town, let us know. We'll send everybody. And I'm thinking, oh, no, you don't need to send everybody. But after a weekend with these guys, I can tell you who needs to go, you know. So that became kind of my little routine for looking at life. You know, is this a problem? Yeah, but as long as it's manageable, maybe I'm willing to live with it, you know. Okay. And maybe there is no solution. Maybe I just need to move on, you know.
Right,
And then maybe there's a solution. There are times that I know that I need to do something to feel better, and I just don't feel like doing it. And I talk to myself, and I say, well, honey, how bad do you want to feel good? And honey says, I don't want to feel good that bad. I'll wait till I feel worse. And then I wait till I feel worse, and then I do what I could have done earlier.
Right.
And I feel better. But I don't beat myself up over it. Okay.
That's the key, right?
So that's the thing there of saying, okay, you know, make the decision. This is all about how do you want to feel?
How do you want to feel?
Yeah.
Emotion management.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that has become, I mean, even like I did a thing not too long ago over in Santa Cruz at the jail for one of my sponsees, and I said, you know, let's take the mystique out of the steps, because we have such an ability to complicate everything and make it like, you know, a 12-year course in theology or something, and you only do one step a month and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it's like, is there a problem? Is there a solution? Are you willing to do it? Do it. Right. And do the best you can. And you can always go back and do it again. And do it again. And do it again and do it again. Yeah. You know? And I believe that step 10 gives us the right to change our minds. Okay? If you made a decision yesterday and you have new information today, then that decision is wrong. Okay, for today. So when we were wrong, promptly admit it.
Right.
I used to think if I said I'm going to do something, then I have to do it, even if it means I'm going off the cliff.
Right.
You know, it's like, and today I can go, oh no, I changed my mind. And the first time I said something like I changed my mind, even my mind went, what? And people go, what do you mean you changed your mind? I said, I have new information.
Yeah.
I changed my mind.
Right.
And the answer is, no, thank you. Can't do it. You know?
Right. No, thank you.
And it's interesting because, like, if you wanted to get into grad school, half of the GRE preparation is questions about if you have enough information to make a decision or not. You know, it's like, what decision will you make? Maybe you don't have enough information to make a good decision.
Right,
you know?
right.
Which is one of the things I wound up doing in recovery. I, like I said, went to work for Westinghouse and eventually got an outside job.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know. My phone and my laptop, apparently, they're friends.
Oh, they're sweet. Yeah, they're the same family. So I went to work for Division of Westinghouse, and I got promoted to outside and project management, and I traveled all over the place, you know. I mean, it was really fun. I learned so much. All of my peers were highly educated people, and people just always assumed that I was, even though, you know, I mean, I got such an education. I got a PhD in AA.
Right.
You know, but the thing was that I wound up teaching PhDs from University of Davis how to do their jobs better. You know, not the political science part of it, but the preparation part of it, the planning part of it, the communications part of it, how to make an effective presentation. And I used to be so shy that I would take an F rather than read a written report.
Really? I cannot see that about you.
But I learned it in the program.
Interesting.
Actually, I learned it shortly before the program. I was in Parents Without Partners, and they made me what they called an amigo. And it was my job to reach out to new people, so I could kind of get past that. But when I first came to the program this last time in 75, somebody said, people who share get well faster. And I went, oh, that's all I needed to hear.
People who share get well faster. You know what drives me nuts sometimes is when people pass, they get called on and they pass.
You want to hear something funny on that? I was at a meeting at 400 West Campbell one time, and it was a newcomers meeting was called, okay? And the first 4 people called on passed, and this young guy stood up and he yelled at them and he said, "You son of a bitches, I bet you never passed if somebody offered you a drink or a drug. I came here to try to find out how not to drink, and every one of you effers is passing." And he left, and I thought, that guy's going to stay sober.
Wow.
You know, but I never forgot that. It's like, yeah, how, you know, I mean, you can just say, my name is Joe Blow and I'm happy, or my name is Joe and I'm happy to be here and I'm an alcoholic, period. You don't have to get up there and solve all the world's problems.
Right.
But this thing of I pass. No. Stand up there and say. And the other thing about people who don't want to stand up and go to the front of the room, well, excuse me, if you talk sitting down and people in back of you can't see your face, they can't hear you, they don't know what you're saying. You know, they taught us, stand up for your recovery.
Stand up for your recovery, yeah.
When I was in Salinas, I was the director of a hospital program over there, which is a whole nother story. And I should tell you about Chico, too. But they called me, you know her, that's the lady that stands up when she talks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because everybody else
stayed
seated?
So when I started a new meeting and I was having difficulty with people doing that, I made everybody sit in a circle. And then, you know, then you could still see them and talk.
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm the director of this hospital program. It's before KDAC. And they want me because I have just left corporate America and I'm this guru to them, to the people who are in charge of filling this. I'm a sales and marketing expert, and I have, I think, 8 years in the program. So I'm the second director. The first one, everybody hated him, was some guy. I don't even know who he was. So I get there, and the whole thing is like, I brought in some portable buildings to put in the parking lot and started family meetings and Spanish-speaking meetings. And we had the guy who was our medical director was an addict. I knew because I knew him from San Francisco. And he got one of my nurses drunk, and she never really recovered from that. But that's another story. So I'm there one day, and I get a phone call from another hospital, and they say they have this guy who was picked up over by Moss Landing on the side of the road. The police picked him up, and he wants to come into the program. So I said, okay, I'll come get him. And I had a little yellow Fiesta at the time that had a sunroof, and I always had balloons flying out of it and all kinds of crazy stuff. And they called it the little yellow ambulance. So I grabbed one of the counselors. I said, come on, let's go get this guy. So I get over there, and this guy is too sick to be moved. And I said to them, this is not a real ambulance. I can't take this guy. When he's ambulatory, send him over.
Yeah.
So that was Thursday. He shows up on Tuesday in a taxi, and now catch-22 is he's not drunk and he's not dying by the side of the road, so his insurance won't cover it. Oh. So I was on the board for a halfway house in San Jose at the time. So I called over there and I said, do you guys have a bed, available? And I'll guarantee his first week's rent. Not because I'm a social worker, but I got the key to his P.O. box, and he's got his Social Security check in there. I mean, he can pay for stuff, whatever. But I said, I'll just, I'll take care of it if we need to. So his name was Chico, and his real name was Herman. Yeah, Herman. And they called him Chico. And he was short, and he had long white hair and a beard, and he looked like Santa Claus. So I take him over to the Greyhound bus depot, and I buy a ticket, and he's looking at it, and he's laughing, and he says, I can't cash this because you put it on a credit card. I said, you want to cash it? Let's go cash it right now, and I'll go back to work, and, you can do whatever you want with the $8. No. He says, I got to do this. I said, so Chico, tell me, you ever been to AA before? He said, oh, yeah, about 20 years ago up in Oregon or Washington. I said, oh, what happened? He says, well, somebody said something I didn't like. In fact, I think it was a woman. I said, oh, really? How about that? I said, you ever go out to eat in a place where the food was bad or the service was lousy? He said, oh, yeah. I said, so did you quit eating out? He said, no. I said, well, that's the deal. You don't quit
That's
going,
the deal. Yeah,
go to a
find
different meeting.
Yeah.
And I said, half of the meetings in this valley got started because somebody got a resentment. And they used to say, all you need is a resentment, a coffee pot, and a big book. And I've told people, you don't even need a coffee pot and a big book. Just go with the resentment. Someone will show up with the book and the coffee,
That's so true.
So he gets on the bus, and I get a call from the guys that he arrived. They picked him up at the bus depot in San Jose. And the next day he calls me, and he's all excited because he's going to help them paint the outside of the house, and he's really going to make it, and so on and so on. 2 days after that, I get a call that he's in San Jose Hospital. He's dying from pancreatic cancer.
Oh.
So at that time, they had a recovery program in the basement at San Jose Hospital, and John Reed's wife worked there.
Oh, is that right?
She was an RN, and I called her and I said, would you just, go up and, just say hi to this guy, whatever, and then I was going to go and see him as soon as I had a day off. Everything that guy owned was in a little paper bag in my car, including a couple of Social Security checks that I mailed back. And I thought later, I could have given those away or bought a new outfit or something. But I mailed them back. But I went up, I got a phone call from the coroner, and they said he had passed away, and they wanted to know if I knew if he had any friends or family. And I said, I really didn't know that. I was just trying to help him, And then he said what I thought was the saddest thing I've ever heard. He said, we think he may have had a friend in Arizona. And I hung up the phone, and I cried. And I cried. And I thought, oh, God. Well, last summer, I guess, summer before last.
What was it about the friend in Arizona that made you so sad?
That he died all alone. And if he had kept coming to AA.
Oh, yeah.
So little Sammy was one of my little idols. I adored Sammy. And he was 18, one of the youngest people to get sober in the Valley. He wrote an article for the Grapevine. He was amazing. He helped more people get sober. He took people fishing all the time. And he and my brother-in-law who passed away were carpet layers together. Okay, Sammy had a back injury, and he wound up getting way out there on opiates.
Oh, shoot.
And he kept trying to get back and trying to get back and trying to get back, and he couldn't get back. And he wound up blowing his brains out in an empty warehouse, and nobody even knew he was dead for 4 or 5 days. Wow. So we had a memorial. Sammy hadn't been around for 8 to 10 years, okay? There were over 200 people there.
Really?
And people got up and told Sammy stories and, some of the things that he had done and how funny he was. And he was an artist. He had gotten involved in metal work, and welding and making all these crazy sculptures and that. And afterwards, whenever I did a speaker meeting, I would always talk about Sammy and Chico. And I said, nobody wondered if Sammy had a friend in Arizona. Think about the power of that here's this guy who, he thought he had all the time in the world. Thank God he died in clean sheets and not on the side of the road.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And Sammy didn't. He died alone, and he was just broken. I remember the last time I heard he was back. A couple people had seen him. I said, be sure and give him a hug. And the last time I saw him, he was living on a ranch and, trying to do better and trying to be off the meds and that. But nobody ever held that against him. He was our family.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, the whole thing about people know our steps, but they don't know our traditions. And about a year ago, I saw on Facebook, thank God the meetings are not Facebook, but I saw where someone was having trouble getting somebody to chair a meeting, and I thought, what do you mean? We didn't get a vote. It's like even if you're dying tomorrow, then you get someone to take your place.
Yeah.
You have a commitment here. And if someone asks you to do an AA service, be honored that you can give back the tiniest little bit.
Right.
So I was at a meeting and there were a bunch of old timers there. And old timers, someone was at least 5 or 10 years more than me. And I said, what do you think is the scoop here? And one of the women said, I think it's because we have so many treatment programs where people learn about the steps, but they don't learn our traditions.
Oh, okay.
They don't understand our culture. Like, this is the way we roll, okay?
Yeah.
And so I've been really on a soapbox about our traditions. And
what do you want people to know the most about the traditions?
I want them to know that the steps will save your life and the traditions will save your sanity and probably the sanity of everybody around you. Okay. Because
That's
if you
fair.
if you can learn how to put principles before personalities.
That's huge.
Okay. Every time I put personalities first, I wind up with resentment.
Right.
I say, oh, they're so cute and they're so young and they just don't know any better. Well, they should know not to put that stuff there. Well, wait a minute. Did you tell them? No. Or how about we're self-supporting through our own contributions? Okay. That came about because the founders realized that letting somebody else support us would also give them
The right
the
to
rules.
make decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
But what about being emotionally self-supporting?
Oh.
If I'm emotionally self-supporting, then you're not responsible for getting or keeping me happy.
I like that.
You can enhance my happiness. You can do sweet, nice things. But you can enhance my life, but you can't be my life. Okay? How about, I have no opinion on outside issues. So I don't get caught up in gossip. In fact, half the time I don't hear something until it's way over 6 months later. I go, well, if they didn't tell me, I don't know anything about it.
Right, yeah.
How about unity and autonomy? How can you have both? Well, when I respect your autonomy, it supports and nourishes our unity. Because it means I'm respecting your right to be you. Okay?
Yeah.
If there's one ultimate authority and it's not me, what do you mean it's not me? I probably know best,
Right.
But no, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's, it's not my job to be in charge of somebody else's life,
Right.
and every single one, like the thing about it's a program of attraction rather than promotion. Okay, just be a good example, and don't think that you have to go out and solve the world's problems. Every time I start to get a resentment, I stop and say, which tradition am I stepping on? I'm stepping on one of them.
Okay.
I'm trying to run somebody else's life, or I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt, or I think I know best, or whatever.
That's such practical application.
It's so amazing how it simplifies your life. I mean, it really does. And it's this thing of, I've learned how to say to people when when they're waiting on me in a store or something, has anyone told you that you're doing a great job today? And I learned that from Cece.
Oh, yeah.
That CCG.
CCG.
Yeah.
We had 2 CCs.
Yeah, I was her
Blonde
sponsor for many. Oh, that's CCF.
Yeah,
I was thinking of CC. Our sweet CC. Yeah. But it's
Man, you have had some amazing women in your life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you have
the
any
best.
idea how many women you've sponsored over the years? It's a long time, 43 years. How long into recovery did you start sponsoring other women?
Probably about 2 years.
Oh, so from the very beginning.
Yeah, I remember, God, my first one, it was so funny. I had known her from Parents Without Partners. And
my mom did that.
Yeah, and she had she had an ex-husband who was sending her all this money, and she was living in subsidized housing, and here I am with no support from my ex, and I'm working 3 jobs and taking care of 2 kids, and every night around 5 o'clock, she'd call with a problem. And one night I thought, where am I getting this stuff that I'm giving her?
Right.
I'm getting it at meetings. So I said to her, unless you're willing to go to at least 3 meetings a week, I can't sponsor you. And she was so indignant. She was telling me, well, I am. And I thought, no, you're not. Because if you were, you wouldn't be calling me every night, and picking my brain over what I learned today.
Yeah.
So
you're setting boundaries.
Right. I didn't know that.
Right.
I just thought this isn't working. Yeah.
Didn't feel good to you.
It's not.
It
Is that
was,
the right thing?
I took notes. It's enabling.
Yes, exactly. It wasn't supporting.
Because you didn't feel good
I didn't
about
feel
it.
good. She didn't feel
obviously
good
didn't
about
feel
it.
good. Yeah.
And then I saw her years later. It was so funny. I mean, God love her. She had the idea that all she needed to do to be in any kind of a relationship was be there, and that they should just be delighted to be with her. And I thought, I think you need to do a little research there, honey.
Yeah,
You know?
that's not a lot of fun for them.
No. And that's the whole thing, that these traditions are the things that allow us to live in peace with people, with them.
Absolutely.
You know, and you know who them are.
Are they like they?
Yes, them are the ones that should be at the meetings but aren't.
Yes.
You know, and the whole thing, you know, practice these principles in all our affairs. I mean, that's hard,
Clean
but
house.
it's so easy once you know what they are.
Yeah.
And the thing about cleaning house, it's like our program in 8 words. Okay, don't drink is 2 words.
Okay.
Trust God is 2 words. Clean house is 2 words. And help others is 2
Help
words.
others.
And that's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing. That is amazing.
Yeah. And I am so blessed. I have 2 sons in the program. My youngest has 30 years. He
Wow.
got sober at Saturday Night Live.
Is that Jeff?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I know Jeff. I think we went to. Did he go to Santa Clara High School?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I grew up in Sunnyvale.
Oh, okay. And in fact, he had more credits than he needed going into high school, into Santa Clara. And he didn't get to graduate with his class because he had skipped so much civics that he didn't get the 5 credits that he needed in civics.
Silly.
And he had talked me into signing the papers for him to go into the Air Force when he turned 18.
Wow.
And he was 17 when he graduated. So he had to go to adult ed and get those credits.
That's so silly.
And then he had met her by the time he was going to have to leave. And oh, God, it was just crazy.
It's amazing that he stayed sober all these years.
Well, you know, he got sober at 16 or 17.
Wow.
And then he left for the Air Force. And all through basic training, he was like cadet of the week, cadet of the month kind of thing. And then he drank when he got to Biloxi. Which I didn't know. I brought him a 6-month chip from Saturday Night Live because I was at a conference in New Orleans on business, and I drove over to Biloxi. And we went out to brunch in Alabama, and, you know, they were playing jazz and all that. And then on the way back, he said, let's stop at the beach. He had to go walk. And he came back, and he gave me back the chip, and he said, I can't take this. And I said, why? And he said, because I've been drinking. I said, oh, okay, you know. So then he wound up getting an entry-level discharge, which is like an annulment. He got to keep all his credits and stuff, and it's not like a bad conduct discharge. They just said, we don't think this is a good fit. So he came home 2 days before I was taking a large group on a cruise. So I took him along. All he did to get ready was go and rent a tuxedo, and he celebrated his 19th birthday on the cruise at the captain's table. Nice. And he got sober on that cruise.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. And so he's just stayed sober ever since. I mean, he really has been active and involved. And, you know, he was so close to Jay Elwell and, you know, broke my heart when Jay died.
Who was Jay?
Jay was John Elwell's son, and Jay was sober, and he took Jeff to his first meeting, and then Jay wound up moving up to Oregon. He and Jeff were very, very close friends for over 30 years.
Wow.
You know, and he was one of my kids, you know. Then my oldest son now has 13 years, and I didn't even know he had a problem because he was like the high school teacher, the coach, married to the diplomat, living, you know, in Africa. And I would see him with a half a glass of wine or something, but see, I didn't know what he was drinking before or after. So 13 years ago, I get an email, and the subject is looking for friends of Bill W., and he was in Chad. And Africa. And so I thought, oh, he probably has a friend coming through town who's in the program or who needs the program. And both he and Jeff would do that. And I'd hook him up with Al Easthouse or Jack or somebody. So I opened it up and it says, Mom, I'm coming home to get sober. And I went, get sober? I didn't even drink. And he said he was going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. Well, he did something like 205 in 90 days. He stayed at my sister's, who is my best friend, down in San Martin, and got involved with the South Valley Fellowship. And he wasn't Pat's kid, and he wasn't Jeff's brother. He was Paul from Africa.
Yeah.
And he got back to Chad. There's no AA. At that time, there was no AA in Chad. But he got, as he was getting off the plane, he got a phone call telling him that they were going to get internet in their house the next day after waiting 2 years. And he they had the internet at the embassy, but they didn't have it at home. So he could go to online meetings, and I would meet him online, and we'd go out in the hall and talk on the internet, and he had, people were sending him CDs and books and all kinds of stuff. So then they get transferred to Uganda, and he finds a group that's been in business for 5 years, and he has 1 year, and he has the most sobriety. And they have one book for the group.
Wow.
So, of course, we started collecting stuff, and I could send things to Virginia, and then the State Department would send them on to Africa, so they got them, and I didn't have to pay the freight from Virginia to Africa. So when he had 3 years, I got to go over and visit him. See,
I remember that. I remember when you went to Africa.
Oh, it was so great. It was so great, and I just had such a good time. And there was one meeting called Saturday Night Live. It was on a Saturday night, and the format was that they'd read from the big book and they'd read from the 12 and 12, and then there'd be a little discussion, and then it was just open sharing. So we're getting ready to leave, and I just adored this one African kid, Sam. He was like, I think he was 23, he was doing master's work in computer science and stuff. And he says, I think before we leave, I should tell you guys something. I said, what's that? He said, I think I'm being overtaken by the obsession to smoke weed. He said, for 3 days now, all I've wanted to do is smoke weed. I said, oh, really? What happened 3 days ahead of that?
Okay.
I said, so you've got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, today's Saturday. What happened Sunday? And he said, well, I was supposed to go to a wedding in South Africa, and then at the last minute I couldn't go, and my fiance was going, and I knew this guy was going to be there who was always hitting on her. I said, So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's ka-chung, ka-chung, ka-chung. I said, you're not being obsessed by that. I said, what you have is an old survival skill that doesn't serve you anymore.
Right.
Okay? So here's what you do. As soon as you feel like that, you make a 911 call. I said, in my country, that means emergency. And everybody has cell phones there. There's no contracts. It's mostly they text because it's cheap. And in fact, the really cool people have two, one on each wrist,
Yeah.
So I said, everybody has everybody's cell phone, and you send a message to one of your brothers or sisters. That, and if you had done that, then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you would have been going through this, and Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you wouldn't be feeling like this.
Right.
But what it did was it gave me the answer, too, that's just an old survival skill.
Right.
And whenever you're dealing with old thinking, what I learned how to do is to say, oh, honey, thank you for sharing. Please send me a God thought.
I love that.
Please send me a God thought. And sometimes that God thought might just be God, 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 God. But it can be, oh, what a beautiful day. I'm so glad I'm here, I'm lucky I have this little dog, whatever.
Right. Being grateful.
Yeah. And I've had the opportunity to not only go to Africa, but I've been in China twice.
Wow.
The first time I was given a gift of a cruise around Southeast Asia. And we spent a week in Beijing, and I got to go to the Great Wall of China and Tiananmen Square and all of that stuff.
Super cool.
And on the Great Wall, I was taking pictures for some of the Chinese tourists with their phones and their cameras. And my friends were up in one of those little
the towers?
Tower things.
Like a guard tower.
And all of a sudden I realized I'm on the Great Wall of China all by myself. There was nobody around. Nobody. And I thought, this is so weird. You can see this wall from space. I wonder if I still have a conscious contact with my higher power. I don't have any purpose in being here. I don't know anybody. Nobody knows me. I don't know the language. Mm-hmm. And there's a little smart aleck who lives inside of me who answers these questions often, who says, oh, honey, you always have a contact. It's just up to you whether it's conscious or not. And if you're here, you have a purpose. So I go, oh, okay, whatever. Fast forward 2 years, I'm walking down the street with Paul, my oldest son. He's working in Beijing. He sent me a ticket to come and visit. And I'm on my way to the fellowship to do a 12 Traditions workshop for the Chinese who don't realize that the back of the 12 and 12 is the traditions. Okay. And they're in awe of this old lady who loves AA and still comes. And because if you're like, I think if you're 55 or 60 in China, someone's supposed to be taking care of you. And I'm out there, if Paul's working, I'm in a taxi. And I have a friend who's going to medical school there who speaks Mandarin because he has to for the Chinese medicine. So I just call him, give the phone to the taxi driver, and, I just go.
Yeah.
So they asked me to do this workshop, and I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. And they have all of the literature translated into Mandarin.
Okay.
So, and they recorded this thing so that any of the groups in China who speak Mandarin would have it, or English. Mm-hmm. And the way it works is like if you speak English, then someone translates to Mandarin. And if you speak Mandarin, someone translates to English. So we cut the workshop down a bit from what I would do here. Right. But I said, before we start this, I need to explain something to you. And that is, why do I keep coming to AA after all these years? Mm-hmm. And the first reason is because I just love us. I love my tribe so much. Yeah. I miss us when I'm not around us. Yeah. And that us can be anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. I love us everywhere. I mean, it's the form might be a little bit different, but the substance is the same. Yeah. The second thing is I'm still learning. And I still take notes. When I was first here in 75, I spied on people because I was afraid I was going to miss the one reason, the real thing.
The one thing, the secret.
And I would try to take notes, and if I still had that, I could turn it over to the archives. I mean, it had everything on it. Mm-hmm. And I was still trying to pay attention. But I was at a meeting a couple of years ago, and we were talking about the ism. And somebody said, well, ISM stands for inner spiritual malady. Is that cool? And I thought, yeah. And I remember writing that down. And I said, so I'm still learning. And then the third thing is I can't help anybody if I don't show up. Right. They're not going to just come knocking on my door. Although occasionally people do say, are you still going to AA? Right. But for the most part, I have to be there in order to help anybody. Right. So they were real excited to find out about the back of the book. And I had told them, you need to read all this. And Paul told me, he's a former high school teacher and coach and that. And he said, that's exactly the right thing to say to them because they learn by rote. And he said, if you ever come back again, they'll know more about this than you do. And I said, that's my hope for everybody that I ever talk to about this. Right. I hope they learn, I hope they get obsessed and learn more about it than I do. Yeah. Because that's the thing. If you want to be happy, if you're not going to be happy, what's the point?
What is the point?
And these, our traditions and our little culture, it's like we learn, we learn how to do that kind of stuff. I have the most amazing family. Mm-hmm. My sister Kathy committed suicide, and I thought I would die from the pain of that. She was one of us, and it was before we knew what we know today about clinical depression, which is different than situational depression. Okay. And so my sister Irene, she's my best friend. She came skydiving with me on my 74th birthday. She's such a good sport.
Did you say skydiving?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to take notes of it. You said skydiving. I was like, what the hell?
What was so funny is her instructor didn't speak English. She was Russian. And the only English that he knew was, uh-oh. And when she told me that when we landed, I laughed so hard I could hardly walk. That's awesome. As soon as he pulled the cord and they're turning and he's going, uh-oh. And I'm thinking, what? I'm having a heart attack? This thing is what? But see, she's such a good sport. She didn't freak out. She was just like, what? And so she's she doesn't drink. She's been to AA and she'll still go occasionally, but she's been very active. She's a level 2 instructor for sporting clays for shotgun shooting.
Oh, sure. Uh-huh.
And she gave me a lesson, and I hit over 50% of them because she's a good teacher, not because I'm any good. And then I have my 2 sons in recovery. I love their wives. I love their ex-wives. They're still my daughters. Yeah, in fact, at Jay's memorial, I said to Jay's ex-wife was saying, I feel kind of weird being the ex. I said, we don't have exes in this family. And Jeff's first wife was right there, and I said, do it, Yeah. And the same with Paul's ex-wife. I mean, she's still my daughter as far as I'm concerned. And I love their current wives. Paul married a woman from Africa, and they just had a 3rd child, 3 little boys. They're so cute. And and I laugh. I look at my family, my extended family and my immediate family, and it's like, okay, out of this very conservative Irish family where all of the grandparents came from Ireland, we have gay, straight, trans, lesbian and gay, Christians, fundamentalist Christians, Catholics, atheists, agnostics, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, interracial. I mean, it's
pretty much covers all of it.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, everybody is just loving and supporting, and it's like,
that's all that matters.
Isn't that so great?
That's very cool.
I love it. I just love it. And I'm aware of the fact that not everybody is like that. And in fact, I have friends on Facebook, transsexuals, who I don't even know. And it all came about because of a family member who was telling me, well, I look different. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's just different car, same driver. I mean, if you don't like the car you're driving, drive another one.
Yes.
And then we talked about solving the world's problems for an hour. You know, I mean, it's like, who cares? Live and let live. I love some of our sister program stuff about, mind your own business.
Yeah.
And I have to tell myself that when I'm driving and it's commuter traffic and I see people going in the commuter lane and they're not supposed to. And I have to say, just you don't go there. Mind your own business. You are not the commuter patrol. You're not the police.
That's a beautiful thing. Well, we're coming up on our time here. Yeah. So I typically wrap up with the question, do you have a... it's called ODAT. It's one day at a time, right? So what is your daily routine or weekly routine for maintaining your sobriety?
Well, I still pretty much do most of the same things that I did in the beginning. As long as my health is up to it, I'm at 4 meetings usually, maybe more. I still chair meetings. I still sponsor people. Yeah. I have a sponsor that I hardly ever call, but when I do, it's like I called her one time. This is probably 2 years ago. And I was devastated and bereft, and I was crying, and I called her and I said, this is just too hard. I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. And I didn't mean I wanted to die, and I didn't want to drink. I wanted to transfer, to another planet or something. Could I get a job transfer or something? Yeah. And I said, it's just too hard. And she says, oh, honey, you're right. Sometimes it's very hard, but it's not too hard. Yeah. So I remember those kinds of things. I pay attention to what I'm feeling throughout the day. And because I didn't have any of those kind of tools when I got here. Right. I mean, my thing was I didn't trust anybody. I didn't share anything with anybody. Mm-hmm. I'd do anything in the world to try to help somebody else. I mean, I was, a social activist, marched against the war, marched for civil rights. My poor kids never had lettuce during the time we were boycotting lettuce for the farm workers. And, I was collecting clothes for a country that doesn't even exist anymore, and, on and on and on. Mm. And no wonder I drank, It's like I felt this responsibility. And today, it's like I'm responsible to be the best person I can be. Everybody's either an example or a warning. Some days I'm both in the same hour, but it's like we just all do the best we can. And I used to think that was such a cop-out, You know, I can remember saying to my dad, you know, oh yeah, God help us all if that's the best anybody can do. Because I thought he meant everybody's living up to their potential. Okay?
Right.
And it
Okay.
was only when I came to recovery that I found out how to live up to my potential.
I love that.
People would criticize it and say, you're just not, you know, you should be blah, 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 you're not doing, blah. Well, in recovery, they broke things down into manageable pieces, you know, and I think just hearing people, you know, I remember one time hearing someone say, I really need you people, and I thought, God, that is the bravest person I ever heard of. Don't ever say you need somebody because then they'll use it against you,
sure.
you know. And what I found out is, yeah, I really do need people, you know, and I
we
have
need
to let
each
people
other.
help me.
Yeah.
That was a hard one. You know, when I was in Africa, I hurt my back. I fell off a dock, and like 6 weeks later, I got back and I couldn't move.
Wow.
And I had to let people help me. I was living by myself, and people came and brought me soup and food and took me to the doctors. And I hated that. And yet I learned how to be grateful, because it's really selfish if you don't let people do that.
Yeah,
You know,
it
I mean,
really is. Such
you know,
a paradox.
yeah, you know how good it feels when you can help somebody.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and I still quasi-meditate. I think meditation was the key to my getting sober.
Was it?
Yeah, my kids knew that if Mom hadn't meditated by 6 o'clock, we just pulled over on the side of the road and they could color in their books for 20 minutes, you know, and I don't know, it was like I began to see things with more clarity, and I began to realize that I really did drink differently. And that step before the step that we talk about, admitted to our innermost self, when I realized that sooner or later I was always going to drink again, I didn't know why I was so shocked.
Right.
It was like, well, yeah, I could quit all the time, but I couldn't stay quit.
Right.
And the thing is, the reason I believe that I'm able to not drink today is because I do today what I did yesterday. You know, and if you keep doing the same thing, you keep getting the same results.
That's
Except
right.
today, I can let go with a little more grace and dignity. I can say what I have to say with a little more grace and dignity. I can tell the truth kindly. I don't have to go for the jugular, you know, although there have been times when I go, oh my God, what's wrong here? I better get to a meeting. The freeway is a good example for me.
A good spiritual gauge.
Yeah. It's like, if I'm in fit spiritual condition, I go, oh, please go ahead. You know,
Right, yeah.
Go ahead of me. And when the fare was only $2 or something, I used to even pay the fee for somebody behind me. But if I'm on the freeway and I'm getting on, and you are not getting on my freeway, okay, it's gone from the freeway to my freeway. And if you do get on, I'm getting ahead of you.
Right.
And then, thank God, this little voice goes, Patricia, when was the last time you were in a meeting? And I go, oh, yeah. Got to be hypervigilant about my attitude.
Yeah. Hypervigilant.
Yeah. And particularly if you're new, you know, you have to be hypervigilant.
especially.
Pay attention to how you feel.
Yes.
Because our brains can control how we feel. You know, it's this thing of, yeah, you don't have to just, I hear people say all the time, my brain's out to kill me. I don't believe that. I think I trained my brain and I had to retrain it.
Yeah, which
You
we
know?
absolutely can do.
Yeah, it's by saying, oh, honey, thank you for sharing. You
Right.
know, please send me a God thought.
And asking better questions like, is this helping me or is this hurting me?
Right. Is this enabling or is this supporting?
I love that.
You know? Yeah, it's the best, worst thing that ever happened to any of us.
I love that saying. So
Yeah.
good. Well, thank you so much for coming to my home and doing the podcast.
Well,
I thought it
thank
was
you. It's
really
been
important
it's
to have
fun
you.
and
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure there's a million things I wish I had remembered to say.
We can do
I don't
this
know what
again.
they are. You know, yeah. It's I'm just so blessed with the
Yeah.
people in my life, my friends and my
Well,
family.
listen, Pat,
And
we are definitely blessed to have you. I've been sober for 24 years now.
wow.
And you were there at the beginning, and you were the example of what a woman with grace and dignity looks like.
Thank you.
And you would just captivate the room, as you still do. And it meant so much to me to have your example. So
Oh, thank you. Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
coming.
much. And yeah, I love this. It's like, I just think, I wish, well, you know, I have a book that went through two editions, and it was supposed to be a third edition in December, and I was sick and I couldn't do anything. But it's like I have this feeling like I have to do stuff when I'm feeling good, because there's so many things I want to be sure that I leave behind.
I hear you.
You know, and I mean, I'm closer to the end than the beginning, most likely, even if I did tell my mother I ain't going.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, thanks again for coming.
You.
It's been a great time, and I'll.
It's my pleasure.
Yay.
Yay, yay, yay.
One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.